All right, so we're going to skip down to table 3 or section 3. This is the table of drugs and chemicals. The table of drugs and chemicals provides an index and table format of drugs and chemicals that are listed in the tabular list. Section 3, Section 4. Did they really do that? It did. Section 4 is the external cause of injuries. External cause of injuries means accident. So anything that is pertaining to an accident, a cup of tea spilling on you, a motor vehicle accident, a train running over someone, someone having an impaled object in their eye, that is an accident. So anything that is an accident, that's why it's called an external cause. It is not caused by something manifested inside of the body, but outside of the body. The index to external causes provides an index of all external causes of disease and injury that are listed and related in the tabular list. So the tabular list of diseases is also known as the tabular list. You will hear me call it that very often. The process of assigning a proper ICD-10 code begins with the physician's diagnostic statement in the patient's medical record, which will describe the condition the patient is receiving care for. The documentation in the medical record will include the main reason for the patient's visit and may also have notes about additional conditions or symptoms that were related and or are related to the illness. You would look up the main term in the alphabetic index as known as the list of disease and injury and then verify it in the tabular list. So the list of disease and injury, that's the index. Now be mindful when you are coding with the ICD-10 book, the index is in the front of the book, not the back. That's where a lot of you get confused. It's not like HCPCS, it's not like the rest of them. The index is in the front. Remember, look up the condition and not the body part. If you look up the body part, you are going to either be looking for days because it doesn't exist, because it's not classified that way, or it will steer you in the wrong direction. So the term patella means kneecap. So a patella fracture is listed under fraction or fraction fracture, the condition. And below it, it is the patella. Now for those of you at home, or for those of you in here, I showed this to Leslie already. When you are looking at your index, you may want to take a sheet of paper or a sticky or a small sheet of paper where you can follow the very tip of the index so you can see how the subset moves over. Because there's going to be the actual condition and then the indentation. The indentation is what you're looking for. Because the main topic, we're looking at patella, it's going to have fracture and then it'll indent itself, patella. You're always looking for the indentation. The list of tabular conventions. In ICD-10 coding manual, it contains general guidelines and chapter-specific guidelines, which will be used in all healthcare settings. You will need to be familiar with the conventions and what they mean. Again, this is not rocket science, guys. The book is there for your resource. So if you get lost, just go in the book, and I promise that you will be able to find it. You will need to understand abbreviations, punctuation marks, instructional notes, symbols, the use of multiple codes, as well as connecting words. These two abbreviations you will need to understand because you will see this a lot in coding. Abbreviations of NEC and NOS. NEC, not elsewhere classified, appears with the term when there is no code that is specific for the condition. There is no code that matches the exact situation. In your notes, the example gives you hemorrhage of eye, so that's bleeding of the eye. It's not elsewhere classified, so it will only give you the code of H57.8. But on the other side, you have NOS, which is not otherwise specified. It indicates that the code listed in the tabular list should be used when the condition is not completely described in the medical record. So an example, enteritis, so that's inflammation of the intestines, bacillary, and that's a type of bacteria in it. Doesn't tell you exactly which bacteria it is, it just tells you it's a bacillus, what shape it is. So not otherwise specified is AO 3.9. So you have to understand the difference because I promise you will see it. Now I posted a handout in Schoology, which I think I'm going to pull up because it's a lot easier to talk about rather than going through all of these words that sometimes tend to run together. So you all have access to this handout. Actually, I'll download it because I can make it bigger. And believe it or not, they took this straight from the book, from the actual ICD-10 book. Hold on, I'm trying to pull this up for this side over here. Alright, so this is pretty much the same thing that's in your notes. The ICD-10-CM is used as a placeholder character for future expansion. So now that we're in ICD-10, if they go in and they update the book on what day? October 1st. If they decide, or whoever it is, that if AMA, the World Health Organization, if they decide, hey, on October 1st, we're changing some of these codes, because we need to give more description to them. Well, in the case of this, there's a placeholder. There's a placeholder already there to where they don't have to create another code, they just add another number. And so yesterday when we were doing the exercise and you were asking, well, why do we get the X? The X is a placeholder for future numbers. So for now, we just use the X to hold a spot. So the example that it gives you, not only here, but also in your PowerPoint, is 033.5XX0. So there isn't a spot for the sixth digit. There isn't a spot for the fifth digit, and there is not a letter or digit for the sixth, so we put an X there. It has to be expanded to the seventh character, but because there isn't anything in the middle between the 5 and the 0, you have to put an X. Did I lose you? Okay. Now, you can see this a lot better when you download it and pull it up. So I've given you an example. Actually, I went in and looked at the code for you and showed you what that code is. So 033.3 has to be expanded to the 7th code. And you could tell due to the red of the dot. Now, I did this from my book, and your book, it's blue. Your book, unfortunately, your books are not color-coded like mine. But when you see a red dot, that's going to mean to expand the code. And right here, there's an X. Red dot X. So with the red dot, it's telling you to go beyond the 4 spaces that you have. This X is letting you know that you're going to go beyond that. Now, where I have it highlighted right here, it'll say one of the following 7th characters is to be assigned to code 033.3. The book is telling you what to do and how to code it. This code has to have a 7th digit. So when you look at it, how would you make it a 7th digit? Correct. So if we were doing 2 fetus, what would be your code on the box? Why is it X2 if it has to be 7 digits? Try again. Is that right? Because you had 0033.3. You still have 3 more spots to fill. Because you said X2. So how many more would you need to put on here? 1 X2. Okay. And this one right here was just an example. I decided to use the top one at first, but we said to use O. But again, you get the example where you have to fill it in to make it 7 characters because it's telling you 7 characters. Diana, you looking at it funny, why? We'll get you there. It's not. Here's another example. 1, 2, the purple box at the end of the code. Sometimes, I'm showing you the difference here. Sometimes you have a purple box at the end of the code, and sometimes you have it at the top. So don't get confused when you're looking at one. You're like, oh, miss, I don't know what to do. In this case, it was only this code, so it was at the bottom of the description. When you go up to the top to a different code, S15, it's right above it. So make sure that you are looking for either the red dot, blue dot in your case, and the text box is going to allow you to expand it to the 7th digit. Now, if there isn't a dot at all, then what is it? That's the code. Correct. You do not have to expand it when it does not have a dot present. So this is in Schoology. You can use this at your leisure. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. So this one, punctuation. Punctuation is important because brackets are used in a tabular list to enclose synonyms or alternative wording or an explanation. So for example, you have B06, that's rubella. Rubella's common name is known as German measles. That's what you might know it as. J00 is acute nasopharyngitis. You know it as a common cold. So again, the parentheses are going to give you the synonym. A parenthesis is different in the context of the ICD-10 book. A parenthesis or parenthesis are used in both the index and the tabular list. These are words that may or may not be in the diagnosis statement, but it can still be used as the code. They are not known as non-essential modifiers. So K51.011, a definitive diagnosis could be ulcerative pancreatitis with rectal bleeding. But the parentheses gives you a little bit more detail that it can be also ulcerative colitis. Ulcerative pancreatitis. You good? No? Okay. How can I make this? Okay, I see. So let's go to the second one, the second example. The second example is H44.611. Put your finger over the old. So when you read it, it says retain magnetic foreign body in the anterior chamber of the right eye. When you remove that finger and reread it again, it's retained old magnetic foreign body in the anterior chamber of the right eye. Did the code change? No, it did not. All the parentheses is doing. Hold on. Let me go back. So it's giving you another layer of the diagnosis. It could be old, it could be new, it could be acute, meaning that it just happened, it could be chronic, that it's happened over time, but that does not change the diagnosis. It's giving you information that was presented at the doctor's office that we know, oh, this is chronic, oh, he's had this for a long time. It's still the same condition. It doesn't change anything. Colons. Colons are used in the tabular list after an incomplete term that needs one or more of the modifiers. Excuse me when I record. Incomplete term that needs one or more of the modifiers following the colon. So you have what's called an excludes code. These excludes, you cannot code them. We will go over them a different time because excludes 1 and excludes 2. It's once you get it, you're fine. But trying to explain it to you guys is sometimes a bit of a headache because I know what I'm talking about and I know what it means, but y'all are like, no. So we will go over excludes with a totally different lecture just so I can break it down. When you're using the colon, it's going to include other diagnoses with it. If you're looking at this where it says includes 1, myopathy, N, rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, scleroderma, Zika syndrome, lupus, those are all encompassed under that one diagnosis. So that's what the colon means, and we're going to add some more to it. If you look up at the PowerPoint where it says Zika syndrome, you can see the perfect example of brackets because Zika syndrome is also known as Sjogren's. That is the way you would use it for a synonym. Don't do this. Don't. Because you're looking like, okay, I'm like, I said, don't do that. All right, dashes are used in both index list and the tabular list. A dash is used at the end of the code to indicate the code is incomplete. So you remember when you were looking up your code yesterday, and there were some that had a dash. You're like, well, where's the rest of it? You had to look it up to find it. That's what the dash is. It's telling you there's some more numbers or some more characters that need to be added. So, for example, you have a fracture that's pathologic, the ankle MA4.47 dash. That means it needs to be, that's an expansion. And it's probably going to be more than one. Not necessarily more than 7, but they're going to be other codes that you need to choose from.
Wait, so is it the same as the dot? Or is that
the colon?
Yeah, no, that's the dot.
What dot?
The
The dot, yes. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just that in the tabular list, you're going to see the dot. The color dot, the red dot, or the blue dot, yes. In the tabular list, you're going to see the color dot. In the index, you're going to see a dash. Excuse me, good question. You will also see a point dash. So it'll give you the beginning of the code. So J44 dot dash. J44 is the beginning of the code, but you still have to expand it. So don't get confused if you just see a dash and you don't see a dot. Dot dash dash, they're the same thing. Always remember to use the guidelines at the bottom of the page of your ICD 10 book that will always tell you what the abbreviations, well, I won't say abbreviations, but the little pictures that will always tell you what they mean. Now, some conditions may require 2 codes, one for the etiology, meaning where it developed from, and the second for the manifestation, the presence of something. The disease's typical signs, symptoms, or secondary process. This is indicated with 2 codes. The second in brackets appears after a term. So pneumonia, the examples that they give us are pneumonia and rheumatic fever. The first one would be 100 and then J17. So the first code is where it came from, etiology. The second code is how it presented itself. So the disease was rheumatic heart disease, or I'm sorry, rheumatic fever. That fever in turn turned into or gave birth to pneumonia. And you can think of it too in the sense of an HIV patient. For an HIV patient, they already have HIV. But then if they were to catch the coronavirus, which one would be the first code? Coronavirus. Remember, the one in brackets is the origin. HIV is where it started. And then the coronavirus manifested because of HIV. Now, this is not the same thing than what we did yesterday. Yesterday we had multiple codes, but those were different conditions. This is when you have a condition that they're basically two diagnoses. So combining codes, when you combine a code, it's describing both the etiology and the manifestation is available in one code instead of needing two. So influenza due to identifies avian influenza virus with gastrointestinal manifestation. That's J09.03. So you don't need the two diagnosis because it's already included in one. Combining codes, these codes, when you read it out loud, it looks like it has two conditions together because it does, but it's only one code. Gastrointestinal manifestation, one code. Connecting words such as due to, following, and during usually indicate the need for two codes. So in this example, we have cramps, muscle, and due to immersion. Because if you were to cover your finger over the cramps, what would you be coding? If you cover it up. No, cover cramps. Cover the whole thing. If you cover that up, what are you coding? No, cover the whole thing. Cramps, muscle, cover all of it. If you cover that whole statement, what are you coding? Girl, if you don't cover that whole thing, put your pencil over the whole line. So if it's due to immersion, what is immersion? What does that mean? Immersion? Correct. But if you just have due to immersion, what are you coding? If your finger is over it, what can you code it with? Girl, Lord Jesus, help me. If you covered cramps, all you have is due to immersion. What is emerged? No, what is emerged? Not what is the definition. If you only have immersion, what have you immersed it with? Correct. So you have to have two codes with these connecting words. Got it? Okay. Due to, following, and during usually need two codes because you cannot code something without. Correct. I'm like, what? Cover that up. Correct. Nothing there. So if there's nothing there, it doesn't match. Then there's not going to be a diagnosis. You can't just code on due to immersion of what? Okay, this right here, the instructional notes and excludes. When we talk about exclude 1 and 2, I'll do that separate. We'll do that like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long it takes you to get it, because it's not the easiest topic to grasp. So I'm going to skip that for now. Because to be honest, I don't even think they asked you anything about excludes 1 or 2 on the exam, but just covering our bases and making sure that you understand it. All right, so a hyphen at the end of the code indicates that additional digits are required. Always code to the highest level of specificity. You will hear me say that quite a bit, meaning that when you look at the code, you have to code it to the highest level of characters or spaces that are allowed. If it's only 3 digits or a character and 2 digits, that's it. But remember, look for your dot. If you do not have a dot, what is it? That's the code. If you have a dot, you have to keep expanding it. If you have an X, what is that called? Correct. It's a dummy placeholder. So it's a placeholder for future reference, which we don't know what they may be, but you know that if it's a seventh character that's needed and there's nothing for 5 and 6, what do you put in the space? Correct, an X. Let's see. Begin with the main term located in the index to disease. Then select the correct code in the tabular list, which you already know. Never, never, never code directly from the alphabetic index, as the code is not always indicated in the index. So you're going to mess yourself up if you do that. Because on the exam, on the actual, well, I've done some of my exams, but I know for a fact on NCCT, they will try to trip you up because they know you're just looking in the index, and they'll just give you the answer from the index. And you're like, oh, it's there, I'm going to pick it. But then it's wrong. It doesn't indicate the 6th and 7th character required. The additional characters will only be found in the tabular list. Okay. Now, I'm going to go through these really, really fast because you all can read. And just making a note for everybody, we cannot tab our books. They will make you take all of the tabs out when we get to the testing site. So that's why I don't let you tab it in class. If you're tabbing it at home, take the tabs out because it's a bad habit to get used to, and you won't be able to have it for the actual testing site. Now, if we go to a testing center, they definitely won't let you have it tabbed. They won't even let you take the book. You have to reschedule. But at least if you're testing with me in the district, all I have to do is just ask you to take the tabs out, but the proctor will ask you to take them out. So again, with the books that you have, unfortunately, they're not color coded like mine. Mine is color coded by chapter. But just so you know, chapter 1 is your certain infectious and parasitic diseases. Chapter 2 are your neoplasms or your tumors and cancer. Chapter 3, chapter 3 are your diseases of blood and blood forming organs and certain disorders involving the immune mechanism. Chapter 4 are your endocrine, nutritional, and metabolic diseases. So your diabetes, your thyroid, those will be in there. Chapter 5, and I haven't been saying this, but F01 and F99 are your mental and behavioral disorders. Chapter 6 are your diseases of the nervous system, G00 to G99. Chapter 7 is your diseases of the eye and the adnexa, which is in the back of your eye. That's H00 to H59. Chapter 8 is H60 to H95, diseases of the ear and the mastoid process. So they broke it down because that chapter is pretty big, because you're doing the eye, part of the ear, and then the ear and the mastoid process back here. Chapter 9 are diseases of the circulatory system. That's for the heart, which is I00 to I99. Chapter 10 is J00 to J99, respiratory issues. Diseases of the digestive system can be found in Chapter 11. Chapter 12 are diseases of the skin and subcutaneous tissue. Chapter 13 are diseases of the musculoskeletal system and connective tissue. 14, diseases of the genital urinary system. 15 is for pregnancy, childbirth, and pupernium. Pupernium. Sorry, it's not even an N in there. Pupernium. Yes. Okay. 16 are certain conditions originating in the perinatal period. Congenital malformations, deformities, and chromosomal abnormalities can be found in Chapter 17, and that is the entire book of code. Now, if you are asked a question on the actual certification exam on how many chapters are in the book, what are you going to do? Correct. Please don't try to guess because the book is in front of you. It's there. Use it. I cannot stress that enough. If there's a body part that you have no idea what it's called, you kind of have an idea. At the beginning of both the CPT and the ICD-10, there are anatomy charts. So if you don't know, guess what? Go look it up. I don't need anybody coming out of the test miss. I didn't know nothing. Yes, you did because I told you to use the book. So ICD-10 has between 3 and 7 alphanumeric characters. Make sure that you remember that because it is alphanumeric. The system is built on categories for disease, injury, and symptoms. A category has 3 characters. The 4th through 7th are categories or subcategories, called subcategories. So this is how a 7th character would break down. And this is why it's a pain because ICD-9 was never this detailed. ICD-10 gives us several choices. So in this case, the category is S82, which is a fracture of the lower leg, including the ankle. Then it's going to break down all the way to the 7th digit. And it gives you the description for each one. The fracture of the upper end of the tibia, fracture of the tibial spine, displaced fracture of the right tibial spine, displaced fracture of the tibial spine, closed fracture, initial encounter. So by the time you get through all of this, all of what they're asking, you should probably get up to a 7th digit with this code. And here is another breakdown of that. The 4th character, if present, indicates etiology, where it came from. The 3rd and 4th character, and so this one is just a regular old 4th character category. This one is going to stop. The next one, I believe, gives you an example of a 5th character, and it's talking about anorexia. So the 3rd category is 50. The 4th category is 50.0, and then it's going to give you the 5th code category. At this point, you would stop because there's not going to be anything else associated with it. So a 6th character, if present, is going to indicate one of the following. is going to indicate whether the drug poisoning was intentional, self-harm, or assault, laterality, left or right, nature of an injury, severity, depth of a skin ulcer is an example, trimester of a pregnancy and with or without given manifestation. Those would be reasons why you use a six character or six digit. And here's your example of six digits. So the first code is Crohn's disease. Well, Crohn's disease is an accurate diagnosis. But let's say you had a friend and they said, man, I have Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is alternating bouts of constipation and diarrhea because they have a kind of messed up GI tract and it doesn't really function on its own it doesn't function well on its own. But when your friends walk up to you, or if the friend walked up to you, they don't say, I have Crohn's disease of the small intestines with rectal bleeding. They don't say that. They just tell you what they have, Crohn's disease. Now, for a more accurate diagnosis, you would have to expand it in this issue to the sixth character to know exactly how much of that disease, or what they're fighting, or what they're going through, or what medications they need. It has to be more specific. And this will be the last one for today. This is the seventh character. If present, is used in identifying codes such as injuries and poisoning, to use the dummy placeholders, and are often the fifth and sixth character. Now, in the little box that we talked about in the handout example, it explains that the A is an initial encounter, B is a subsequent encounter, and S is the sequela. Now, here is the example that was given, or yes, these are some examples that were given in regards to the seventh character. And these are just examples. This doesn't come from anywhere. It's just showing you how they all have seven characters. And the last one is showing you how to use a dummy placeholder. Any questions? All right. So I know it seems like a lot. The ICD 10 chapter and the CPT chapter are probably the longest. So when I see you tomorrow and you retake your HCPCS exam, and that goes for all of you, if you're wanting to retake your HCPCS exam, it will be open again tomorrow at 11:45. Please remember that when you do take your exams, that you must score, or you should score at least a 70 in order to be able to sit for your certification exam. So if there are no questions, please make sure that you write down your Chromebooks. You can go ahead and log off, and I will see you all tomorrow.